My name's Brittany.
Hi, I'm Cedric.
Yeah. We've been married for 15 and a half years. We were both witnesses our whole lives.
Whole lives.
And we left, I was 30 and you were 32?
Baptized when I was 15.
I think I was 16.
We are second and third generation Jehovah's Witnesses. My grandmother came in, raised my mom, and then we were raised, me and my siblings were raised as Jehovah's Witnesses.
My mom is as old as your grandma.
Right.
My older brother was a Bethelite. My mom has like a shelf as big as this wall of every bound volume. Publications.
Books.
All the rainbow books. It was impounded.
Right. You definitely had it stricter than we did. I know all of your friends and family who are still in it are going to blame me for this because they felt when we first got together that I wasn't as spiritually strong as you deserved, and so they cautioned you against marrying me.
You weren't as spiritually devout to the witness organization as I was.
Right.
When we got married, everybody was like, he's not a pioneer, he's not a ministerial servant, he's no good. And I was like, but look at that face. I knew if I didn't get married to this guy, I would regret it my whole life. I did toe the idea of like, should I wait for a ministerial servant or an elder? And what would my life look like? You know, like I'll be like the prim and proper pioneer wife on the elbow of like the elder. But that's not really the life I envisioned for myself. I envisioned marrying for true love, and I knew it was true love when I found him. And so that's why we got married, despite his spirituality not being quite up to the standard that you're supposed to be at when you get married. He did come up to my level when it came to like wanting to be better and wanting to do better. You know, like we need to study. Okay, we will study. You know, like we need to do the text. And as like naggy as I was, like, this means our life!
Yeah.
That wasn't even the reason we left, though. It wasn't a lack of spirituality.
You're the one that did all the research and kind of started the ball rolling, and then I kind of just jumped on because the things that you were learning were distressing enough that we had to come to a decision as a family, looking into what people were saying, not just against the organization, but things that the organization was kind of trying to reply to those people. You know,
what
it wasn't
they were saying in defense.
Right. It wasn't just an absolute critical view of the organization. It was looking at both sides.
I think basically we left because we had kids. We had a lot of kids. And we wanted to protect them from all of the things we were learning. That was kind of a wake-up call in of itself. As a Jehovah's Witness, you're not like instructed not to have children, but it is very highly recommended to not to. It's looked down upon. Lots of couples wait until the new system to have children.
Some even go as far as to get fixed so they can't have children, because God will fix that in the new world.
Yeah. Your body will be remade perfect. Oh, like, don't even get me started. Like, I was 300 pounds. People don't get their teeth fixed because you're going to have a perfect body in paradise any minute. You know, it's coming in like 2 weeks. So then that'll fix everything. You don't really see a lot of exemplary couples with more than 2 or 3 kids.
Or with any kids.
Or with any kids. So for us to have 3... and people were like, you need to stop. And we had our 4th, and people were literally like, get a vasectomy.
Yeah.
And then forget it when we had 5. When we had 5, it was like, what are you doing? You're ruining your life.
Yeah, my favorite was, not our problem.
Yeah. It's not your problem. Is it a problem?
Is it a problem to have a family?
Like,
to have children, to bring life into this world?
I'm sorry, I thought they were a blessing from God. If Jehovah loves children, if Israelites had dozens, and Jesus said, let the children come to me, it's like, why as having children so cast down. I understand the mentality of like the end is coming soon and you don't want to pile more on your plate than you're capable of handling. Is it though? Because here we are in our mid-30s. Our son is 13.
We weren't supposed to grow up in this system.
Yeah, like...
We were always told...
Our parents weren't supposed to grow up in this system.
Yeah. I can remember as a kid, my parents, I'd say, I want to do this when I grow up. And they're like, well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Why can't I do that? Because Jehovah's Witnesses don't do that. Or because...
Oh, no, you don't do that.
Yeah, you don't do that because you're Jehovah's Witness. You want to be an astronaut, you can't be an astronaut because in order to be an astronaut, you have to fly jets. In order to fly jets, you got to join the military.
Yeah, you don't join the military.
And it's very hard as a child to hear you have this dream that you want to achieve and you are already being told you cannot ever achieve that because the steps to achieve it means that you will never get there. That is very damaging, I think, to a child psychologically.
And you don't really realize it until you're a parent yourself and
Yeah.
you start saying these things to your own children.
Yeah.
You can't be friends with them. You have to go and tell this child at school, preach to them about this way. They're not acceptable to Jehovah and they're going to die at Armageddon.
Yeah.
It doesn't make
And then
sense.
to have your child explain it to their friend
Yes.
is very horrifying.
Yes. As a parent, it doesn't make sense to say these things to your child. So I think that was another factor in how we woke up, was the fact that we were trying to raise our children a little bit more leniently than the Watchtower would have required. Well, I remember one time we came out of a talk where it was like, paradise is so soon. It is so soon, and it's right around the corner. And then like the whole rest of the talk was like, let's think about the goals that will happen in paradise, the health, the beauty, all of the things that a paradise offers. We came out of that meeting and our daughter was literally like, okay, so like next week, right? Like it's coming, right? Like any day, right? I'm so excited. I can't wait to have a panda and a tiger and a lion. And we literally had to go, no. Okay, I know that was a really exciting talk. Mm-hmm. But in reality, paradise might not really actually come in your lifetime.
Yeah,
like we have to rely on Jehovah's timing because it might take a long time to bring everybody in the world into the truth and give everybody the opportunity to come into the truth that will before Armageddon comes. It might not happen in your lifetime, and that's okay. You know, and that was how we trained our children despite what was said from the platform. Yeah,
so instead of feeding the fantasy, we gave them a healthy dose of reality because nobody did that for us. Nobody told us, you might grow old in the system. Because nobody believed it. Either they didn't believe it or they didn't want to believe it.
It's literally written in the literature, you will not grow old in this system of things.
Right, for the 1975
in the 60s.
Yeah.
1969.
We were always told, imagine yourself in the new system with, animals for pets. Whatever animal that you want can be your pet. And so growing up in the organization was, you don't live for the future, you live for beyond the future of paradise.
They don't prepare for this future, prepare for the one that's coming.
And that is in itself detrimental too to people. The organization keeps them so busy they don't have time to appreciate the beauty of the world around them as it is now. Studying for meetings, going to the meetings, because when you're not at the meetings, you're studying for the next one and going out in service and preparing for service, preparing the children for service, and preparing parts for the meetings. There was never enough time to fulfill all of my responsibilities up to my own personal goals, my own personal preferences. I would prefer to do a much, much better job at these things, but there's so many more things that are requiring my time and energy and patience, and that I can't do them all.
I remember a pioneer we knew that would say that too, that there just isn't enough time in the day. I don't know how elders do it.
Because I always felt like I wasn't doing enough. There was always that heaping of self-guilt and self-loathing of, I'm not doing enough, and so if I'm not doing enough, then my family's going to suffer, or we're going to be in trouble with the elders, or we're going to die at Armageddon because I didn't do enough. So being out has definitely helped tremendously with that overwhelming guilt that comes with, every meeting you get a steady helping of give more money, give more time, give more energy.
Are you doing enough?
Are you doing, you're constantly being asked to look inwardly. Are you doing enough? Don't compare yourself to other people, because other people's circumstances are different than yours, but compare yourself to yourself. Do you think you're doing enough?
No.
Giving enough?
No.
Time, money, energy. There's
I should study with the kids every night. I should go out and service more.
Every single meeting, it's more. Donate more money, donate more time, donate more energy.
It's so bad that it gets to the point where it's no longer a carrot dangling in front of you that's like, yeah, I want to do that. It's like you're flogging yourself to get going. And every thought you have is literally controlled. Is that spiritual? Is that against Jehovah? Is that wrong? Should I be studying instead of doing that? Should I be going out in service instead of going on a picnic? Every thought, every action is literally sickening and guilt-ridden.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people with health problems that are probably related
Absolutely.
to that mentality of more.
The anxiety, the physical sicknesses that are prominent in the Jehovah's Witness congregation, the stress,
the depression,
the cancers of people that are so repressed and so mentally controlled that it's starting to come out in their bodies.
Yeah, parable that Jesus told of the widow with the 2 coins of small value. Everybody was giving out of that surplus, but she gave 2 coins of small value because it's all she had to give. So give everything and God will take care of you. Well, that they translate into, even if you don't have it to give it anyway, because God will take care of you. So they are constantly asking people to give everything and then give more, because don't worry about it, because God will take care of you. If you need that money for bills and groceries, don't worry about it, because Jehovah's people will give you groceries. They give these stories and examples.
The relief of not having that guilt constantly upon us.
Yeah, and the time coupled with that.
The freedom.
Yeah.
I feel so happy I could cry every Sunday when I'm like, we don't have to go to meeting. Getting all the children dressed, hair, shoes.
The fight over shoes. Oh.
And then making sure you were pre-studied a day or 2 in advance. Yeah. Making sure each child that could speak had a comment prepared.
Had an answer, yeah. To constantly stress about, can I get home in time from work to get ready for meeting and have a meal and then go to meeting?
He didn't eat dinner.
No. Because when I would get off work at 6 and meeting started at 7 and it's a 20-minute drive from work and I've been sweating all day.
Yeah, he comes home, showers.
Come home, shower, get dressed, we're out the door, and we make it barely in time.
I had the chore of feeding the children, cleaning up the children, dressing every child, hair, shoes, clothes, and all by myself. And dressing myself. To us, it was just what you do to put Jehovah first.
And I'm not saying it was an issue, I'm just saying the amount of time.
Yeah, so now that's no longer a factor, now it's like, oh my gosh, like
we can spend more time with our children.
What a weight off. What a complete relief. That is not necessary in order to please God.
Yeah.
I remember every time we wanted to do something with our friends, go to a movie, it was we have to go out in service first that morning. And then we can do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, let's do that. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah,
we'll take all 3 kids, 4 kids at the time, all 4 kids, and the 6-month-old baby out in service and drag the 2-year-old to the door with all her donut on her face. And then back to the car. Okay, we did it!
Yeah.
We feel like a nap now, but we'll go see a movie. And then it's like, if you're not making all the meetings, then no, we can't hang out with you.
Yeah.
It's like, we're struggling.
Yeah, when you need friends the most is when you're not allowed to have them. It makes you
We were cranky parents.
We were cranky parents. They're not always going to behave. They're going to struggle.
Why can't you be more religious?
Yeah, you blow up and you're like, why can't you just listen?
When they would do something unbeknownst to them against Jehovah, or against the regulations of being a Jehovah's Witness, You
did
ate
what?
birthday cake
Yeah.
at school?
You said the Pledge of Allegiance?
You said the Pledge of Allegiance, and you felt like you almost had to like say Hail Marys to like cover them or something. Like something had to be done to appease the gap between them and Jehovah at that moment of like, you're gonna die at Armageddon.
Yeah.
Because that fear was the driving force of like, you can't do that, and how we would come across of like, this means your life. You're going to die because you're not doing what you're supposed to.
So the freedom from stress, now we have time. And the freedom of, being kind for the sake of being kind to our children. It's just given us, the ability to just take a breath, has been
We're not
huge.
as like strict with our kids anymore. We're not as harsh with our kids.
Harsh is a good word.
We're not so terrified for our salvation or for theirs. That was another thing that was a wake-up call for me, was how much pressure there is to baptize them young. Jesus was 30 when he got baptized. I woke up when I was 30. Why are we pressuring my babies? They can't even like make a contract to clean their room every day,
Right, and the thing is that the seriousness of the dedication is likened to getting married. It's a lifelong dedication.
That's what they say.
So why would you get married when you're 8 years old or 10 years old or 12 years old? You wouldn't.
This is a decision that's going to impact your whole life.
This is an adult decision that needs to be made as an adult, not as a child.
And Jesus didn't do it until he was 30. So what is the exemplary reason here that we're doing it as a child?
The biblical reason.
We don't do infant baptism because the Catholics do that, and that's ridiculous. We wait until the child has like the ability to answer for themselves.
Right.
But how much
you don't let a child answer for themselves in like a police situation. If there's a kid involved, the kid's not allowed to be interviewed by police by himself.
Right. That was always a thing I didn't agree with. No, my kids aren't getting baptized until they're old enough to make that decision.
To understand what's behind the decision. And
there were several things like that throughout my whole life where it was like, I don't quite agree with that, but we'll stick to the arrangement. That's okay. That doesn't affect my relationship with Jehovah.
Right.
Over the years, we went through a lot of waking moments where we were like, whoa, are we going to stick to this? We did that several times.
Mm-hmm.
When we first moved to Washington State, we were shattered. We could have made or broken then, And then we got pregnant with our fourth, and you were working nights, so meeting attendance was horrible. I was pregnant, and then I had a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-year-old, all in that time, trying to let you sleep during the day, make meetings. We were making meetings in any congregation that allotted for the time we needed to go to a meeting. Our friends that we had made in like surrounding congregations were like, what can we do? What can we do to help you? And we're like, oh, you guys are awesome. All that we could really need is like help with the kids and maybe meals for a couple days after the baby is born. And they're like, on it, got it, no problem. We got a phone call from our friend who was arranging it, and they said, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I did. I think I stepped on some toes. But I guess I went about this the wrong way. There's like a certain protocol you're supposed to go through in order to deliver meals to people who need it. So there's like some sort of committee in the Kingdom Hall that handles such a thing if it's needed. And that was news to me because we were from that rural town where it's like, you just do that kind of thing. You're just, a person has a baby and everybody is like on it, like the whole congregation was like, we got this. And so for that to be like, no, we have to go about protocol in order to do this. It's like... And
then the protocol was we didn't need the help.
Yeah, it was like, did you just have surgery?
Yeah.
Are you capable of movement?
Yeah.
Are you in the hospital? Did you just get out of the hospital? Okay, well, you don't really need it then. We got a call from an elder, and I remember he called, And you were so baffled by the whole situation. You're like, I can't deal with this, because you were mad and you didn't want to come off as mad. And plus, you had been working nights. We had just had a baby. We were exhausted. And so you were like exhausted and you were angry. I took the phone call and I remember my mouth just like, whoa. Because this brother barely knew us. He was a new transfer to the congregation. And he had just been going off what somebody in particular had been telling him in the Kingdom Hall.
Well,
Nothing else.
He was like, oh, you guys haven't been going to meetings. And we're like, we have been going to meetings. We've been going to meetings over here.
We go where we can,
right.
when we can. We have 4 kids, you know, and no help. And so he was like, oh, you've been going to that Kingdom Hall? So why don't we just have your cards transferred over there then? And I was like, mind you, I just had a baby, but I basically heard that as, you're kicking us out of our Kingdom Hall.
Yeah.
Like he was like, I don't want to deal with this. We'll just move your cards over to the congregation you're going. And I was like, but wait, we're going to that one too. We go where we can. And
yeah, you were going to both.
We had, like, all of our friends were in that congregation. And the ones we were making, we didn't know anybody at. That was really devastating. The way he was talking to us was like we had some kind of ulterior motive to getting our friends to bring us meals after we had a baby.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, what's your angle? Like, you don't need help. And it was like, I'm sorry. They offered, and we were like, oh, well, maybe meals would be helpful. That would be awesome. That's what we did the last 3 times we had a baby. Our friends brought us meals. And I remember just hanging up and crying. Just the emotions of, like, just having a baby. Having our friends being so kind to us and then calling us and being like,
we can't help you.
We're so sorry. There's, like, a certain protocol. You have to call your elder and find out how to get meals. And it's like, are you kidding? Like, there's a protocol to friendship?
To kindness, to decency. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't believe what was happening. My mouth was, like, hanging up and I was crying. And I looked over at Cedric and I was just like, well, what do we do? Like, we're kicked out of that hall. Nobody knows us in the new hall. So basically this is our out. Like, we could just, like, get cut now and not have to worry about making meetings. But then it was like the core belief of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally said that we're not doing this for men, we're doing this for Jehovah. And this is just a trial of testing our faith to see if we love Jehovah more than people. And so we stuck to it, you know, we stayed.
For a few more years even.
Yeah.
Even throughout those 4 years, it was still things that would come up that would cause us to question whether or not we were still in, you know, the true religion, the right religion. So,
like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
We started really recognizing gut instinct issues where it's like we would look at each other during meetings and be like,
yeah, that's not right.
Whoa.
That's not what the Bible says.
I always had certain logical issues. I had to be younger than 5. We were studying out of my book of Bible stories, the story about Job, and she would make it a point to record our sessions, like on a tape recorder, because I enjoyed listening to them played back. So this is burned in my memory. My mother was reading to me out of this book, and she was copying the tone that was used by the governing body member when he read it to the children through a cassette tape. And when he read it, he goes, in the voice of Job's wife, "Curse God and die!"
Curse God and die.
Like, angry, mean, like, she was, like, trying him too. And I was like, wait, how do you know it wasn't like, just curse God and die? And she explained it to me, like, no, Job's wife was a naughty girl. Like, she was mean to Job, and she was a bad girl, and she didn't love Jehovah as much as Job did. But then, years later, when I was an adult, there was a Watchtower article that explained that maybe Job's wife was just as tired as Job, you know, and with all the trials happening. She lost her children too. She was watching her husband go through all these trials and was like, please, just end it. Just curse him, and then you can just die, and it'll be okay, and then you'll be gone, and you won't be suffering anymore. And that was kind of how it was explained in the Watchtower, and I was like, I said that! 5-year-old, I said that! That's incredible! So my intuition really was kicking in around then. Wait, that was kind of a big thing to be wrong about, you know? To be like interpreting that scripture one way and then years later be like, actually maybe it was a different way. If you can be wrong about interpreting scriptures in a certain way, what else are you wrong about? After I'd had a baby, I didn't want to get back on the birth control pill. I said to one of my friends who was a pioneer that I was going to get an IUD, and she kind of looks at me like, no. And I was like, what? And she goes, you need to read this Watchtower article. And I was like, okay, is that something we're not supposed to do? But she didn't want to tell me, no, we're not supposed to do that. You're not really supposed to tell a person what to do. You're supposed to let people make their own conscience decisions as long as it's the right one.
As long as it's in line with Jehovah's thinking.
Right. There was a Watchtower article from years before that had said something about how IUDs were abortion.
A form of abortion, yeah.
Essentially. Because it makes the lining of the uterus inhabitable. And if you believe that life begins at conception, then you believe that a baby that is conceived that cannot attach to the uterus is essentially aborting it. So that was news to me. So then I read the pamphlet that came with the birth control pill and found out the birth control pill works exactly the same way. First of all, it's supposed to hinder you from ovulating, but secondarily, it makes your uterus an inhabitable place for a fertilized egg to attach to. So for me to be like, I'm not supposed to have an IUD because it's a form of abortion, but it's okay to have the pill because... why? But also, you shouldn't have children. You should wait until paradise, because having children means that you're not devoting enough time to Jehovah. They're a hindrance. As Brother Let called them, they're
enemies of God.
Little enemies of God. What are you supposed to do? You know, if you're supposed to get married but not have kids, but you can't have a birth control, what are you supposed to do? Over time, we kind of just quieted our doubts, stuffed those intuitions. Oh, that's Satan trying to mislead us, and just shoved him aside and shoved him down, and then just ate our feelings. And I would come across information about cults. I found it intriguing to understand how cults work. As a Jehovah's Witness, I found it intriguing to understand how other religions and cults could work. But in doing that, it was like, that sounds really familiar, Cedric. Our religion does that, but not really, because ours isn't as bad.
Yeah.
Those all kind of like were just a little bit eye-opening. It got me thinking. In doing research, you come across how propaganda works, what propaganda is, what it sounds like. I think what really rattled our cage was the 2016 convention. We made the profound effort to attend because with Cedric working nights and with 4 children, it was an ordeal to get there.
Certainly.
So we got there and we watched the infamous bunker drama, and our children hid between us. And terrified, and we were all kind of glued to our seats, like, it showed all the different witnesses and their instances of faith despite trial, and then come to find out that they're recounting these instances of faith while cloistered in the basement of one of their homes during a government raid looking specifically for Jehovah's Witnesses.
Do you see anything? Do you see any witnesses? Where are they?
You can hear cops and things banging on the doors and walls.
Shut the basement. Shut that door.
And it was terrifying because it communicated to us, this is coming shortly, like in our lifetime. Get ready for this. During the recounts of their experiences, there was talk of Kevin. Kevin wasn't making all the meetings, or Kevin wasn't out in service as often as he needed to be. Somebody's looking around in the basement for Kevin and goes, he should be here by now. Where's Kevin?
Kevin knows we're in the Great Tribulation.
And they go, didn't you know?
Darren, I thought you had heard by now.
Kevin said when our message changed from one of good news to one of judgment, he wanted nothing to do with us and he left.
When our message changed from good news to judgment, he was telling everyone that it would make problems for us and that he was done.
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Whoa.
hell yeah, he did, because our message is preach this good news of the kingdom and then the end will come. That's how the scripture goes.
Yeah.
So when does the message change from one of good news to one of judgment?
And who makes that call?
And who makes that call?
Yeah.
Because you're
that's
not
scriptural.
supposed to add or take away from the scriptures. That's the big no-no.
Yeah.
And so who's gonna say that, and what are we gonna do when they do? So we were sitting there, and just like the drama ended, we looked at each other, and the drama ended, and then the day ended, and we pack up the bags and the lunch and the children and grab the hands, and we're walking toward the car, and I look at him and he looks at me, and I'm like, that was propaganda.
Yep.
And that's what he said. Yep. And that was kind of the beginning of the end for us. The world as we knew it changed. The world that was our religion was shifted.
You said to the elders, we need a shepherding call. We need someone to come and talk with us. We have things we need to discuss.
My dad had just died, and I was forced to deal with my disfellowship sister. We were both hurting because our dad just died, and I wanted more than anything to like comfort her and like be a sister to her. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I need a shepherding call because I don't know like the protocol of dealing with a deceased family member and having to deal with a disfellowshipped person at the same time. And they're like, you're smart, you'll figure it out. Like you know your head and your heart. Because I was like still hanging to that last thread of being a Jehovah's Witness. And then birthdays, there's nothing more worth celebrating than the beginning of life, I think. This is the day your life began, especially for my own children. Like, I have very pleasant memories of bringing my babies into the world, and I want to celebrate that anniversary.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mariah. Happy birthday to you. Now blow your candles, right?
Yay!
Depending on how you interpret the scripture in Job, where Job went to his children's homes, and it was each child had a celebration of their day, that can be interpreted as a birthday party that a worshiper of Jehovah had part in. Personally, I feel like what's more worth celebrating than life? I don't know. The death of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We can celebrate that every year. Like, does that sound a little satanic to you? Like, let's celebrate the day he died. And by the way, all the people who are Spirit anointed, who believe they have a one-on-one relationship with Jesus, who will be in heaven with Jesus, get to symbolically eat his flesh and drink his blood. Does that sound a little disturbing when you think about it? Aren't we supposed to abstain from blood?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that how the scripture goes? Abstain from blood. They liken getting a blood transfusion. They illustrate it by saying if your doctor said no alcohol, or you have to not eat cake anymore.
Abstain from alcohol or abstain from cake.
Abstain from alcohol, abstain from cake. You wouldn't inject it in your veins, would you? So we wouldn't do that with blood. That's not how you use alcohol or cake. That's not how you utilize it. You can't taste it if you inject it. It would kill you, first of all, and that's not how you use it. Blood was to be used for the intended purpose that it was created for. It means life. It's to sustain life, which is what blood transfusions do. And if you do your research, abstain from blood, it wasn't clearly elaborated on in those scriptures, because in those days people understood that blood was being used for unnatural purposes, like eating it, which is what you do symbolically on Jesus' death, which is the most sacred night of the year to Jehovah's Witnesses, the day he died, not the day he was resurrected. And we go through the torment and the torture and his gruesome death every year. And how many of us feel so sick after that night?
You know, when New Light came out, it was just like, whatever. You know, it's just another refinement of what we already know.
My eyes always glossed over when anything like that happened. It's like, thank God we have people to do our thinking for us, because this is hard. These are issues that I don't even want to try and figure out, you know, like what
why
7 times 7 times, like, okay, well, you tell me what the math is and I'll believe you.
Yeah. We first started to get some of the inklings that things weren't right. You know, there were some questions that Brittany saw that she did some homework on, and she's like, hey, look at this. And I'm like,
Talking about when we like really broke up?
Yeah, like one of the first things that you saw that I kind of dismissed was that the organization was part of the United Nations for 10 years.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird, but I was just like, whatever, that was a long time ago.
That was a big one for me.
And that was a big one for her, but it wasn't really for me.
I remember studying the Revelation book as a child and just being like, this is it, man.
Yeah.
And my mom was like really into that Revelation book.
The Revelation book painted the United Nations in a pretty horrific light. It was the wild beast that the harlot of false religion rode on. You know.
That really stuck with me as a kid of how bad the UN was. So
right.
For it to be like, actually, we've been in bed with them for like 7 years.
We've been part of the United Nations.
But it's okay. It was just for a library card. We just needed access to their library.
Right.
I mean that's okay, right?
Yep. For me, the moment that came to me was actually after I had read an article about the Australian Royal Commission and Jeffrey Jackson's interview with legal counsel.
My name is Jeffrey William Jackson.
In September 2005, you were appointed as a member of the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
That is correct.
Where he was outright asked, do you consider Jehovah's organization to be the direct communication from God to its people?
Well, yeah, like, are you part of that? Like, is the governing body, like, God's mouthpiece?
Yes.
Was essentially the question.
Is the governing body God's mouthpiece on earth? His reply was, well, that would be presumptuous of me to say.
And do you see yourselves as Jehovah God's spokespeople on earth?
That I think would seem to be quite presumptuous to say that we are the only spokesperson that God is using.
The reason that affected me so deeply and so profoundly is that from a young age, I remember discussions at the meeting, talks, question and answers about how you stand up for your religion, how you stand up for your beliefs in a legal situation.
If you're ever in the face of persecution in a court situation or something.
If you're in a court situation and a judge asks you to give account of your faith, you get up and you give account of your faith,
like
regardless
we were expecting the next Nazi situation where it's like we would be facing like
persecution,
death, or stand up for your God, and what are you gonna do for it?
Yeah. For him to cop out like that as a member of the governing body and a leader of the organization on earth, and as everybody in the organization believes to be God's mouthpiece here on earth. They tout themselves as being in direct line, in communication, as anointed servants of Jehovah, to be disseminating the food at the proper time to his people. The person who is supposed to be the epitome, the utmost purveyor of that faith, says, well, I'm not going to say that we're God's mouthpiece on earth, who are directing the organization according to God's will. That was just it for me. It didn't even matter.
Popped your bubble.
It didn't even matter anything else before or after that. That in and of itself, that one fact for me was enough to completely disenchant me from this organization.
He's like, I'm done.
And just be like, that's it. We're not going back. Because now I have proof. I have hard proof that even the governing body doesn't believe in their own abilities or their own powers as God's anointed Christians.
The foundation crumbled. It took me a little while longer. I was like, hold on, wait. Let's be completely thorough with this. And I like...
Yeah, let's get context.
So
and I was like,
so much research. He was like, I'm convinced. And I looked into everything there was. My mom was a witness since like the 50s, I think. About the 60s. So she has like all the bound volumes of all the Watchtowers and Awakes and all the old literature. So I verified everything
with her. Like over the phone. Hey,
like I looked it up online, but then I would see a quote and I'm like, this could totally be photoshopped. And I'd be like, Mom, can you look up that Watchtower, that Awake? Yeah, this one. Okay. Read this paragraph. It really says that. And through the course of doing that with her, subsequently woke her up as well.
Another one of the things that really bothered me, all the new light that was touted as refinement, was actually just corrections of mistake. How the stance of organ transplants had changed.
Yeah, we never knew that.
Right, they don't tell you, okay, well, we really messed up back here and said that, in the Watchtower it said organ transplants were akin to cannibalism. You wouldn't eat anybody's flesh, so why would you have somebody else's flesh put inside of you to keep you alive?
When you finally recognize that kind of major discrepancy with the doctrine that Jehovah's Witnesses preach, when they say, oh, no organ transplants because it's cannibalism, wait, we take it back, it's fine now. Logically, your mind has to go, wait, if they could be that errant about something that big that gets people killed, that they can just change their mind and be like, never mind, it's okay. What about right now? What about right this minute? Like, is there anything that we have to look that deeply into and be like, no, there's something wrong with that? And that's what we did.
Right, so the question that I had to ask was, all these people who died when organ transplants were cannibalism, then suddenly they're not. The issue that I take with that is prior. All those people who died needlessly when an organ transplant would have saved their life, whose hands is all of that blood on? Is it on God's hands, or is it on the people who made that decision for them? The organization doesn't stand up to their own beliefs. And people have died. Millions
On
of people
account
have
of their
died
mistakes.
on account of their mistakes. There is no possible way that this is an organization that is governed by God.
Yeah.
There just isn't.
When I asked my brother that very line of reasoning about the cannibalism and people dying at the hands of a mistake, his reasoning was, well, they'll be resurrected because they died faithful to Jehovah, so they are definitely guaranteed to be resurrected. And it's like they died faithful to an inaccurate or misrepresentation of a scripture at the hand of men.
Yeah.
And we were like, no. Okay, if you're going to make fundamental flaws about our doctrine, are we going to just follow blindly, or are we going to be like, this is an error and we don't have to listen to this? So there's a Watchtower article in 2013, November 15th. It says, the most practical step that we can take to prepare for the coming attack of the Assyrian is that of strengthening our faith in God and helping our brothers to do the same. When the Assyrian attacks, the elders must be absolutely convinced that Jehovah will deliver us. At that time, the life-saving direction that we receive from Jehovah's organization may not appear practical from a human standpoint. The information we may receive from Jehovah's organization may not appear practical from a human standpoint. All of us must be ready to obey any instructions we may receive, whether these appear sound from a strategic or human standpoint or not. Okay, that was 2013. And then in 2017, in July, be determined to stick to Jehovah's organization and loyally support the leadership he provides, no matter what imperfections may surface. Do not be quickly shaken from your reason when faced with what appear to be damaging attacks by apostates or other such deceivers of the mind, however plausible their charges may seem. So essentially what this is saying is, don't use logic to come to conclusions.
Yeah.
Blindly obey your directions.
Yeah. Whether they make sense to you or not. I distinctly remember being, at the meeting and listening to that paragraph, the first one that she mentioned, being read and going, nope.
Jonestown! Jonestown!
That is not how this works. All these things, when you heap them all on top of each other, just creates this mountain of evidence that the organization is not God's true religion on earth.
There's a very bold line when it comes to innocent mistakes or typos, and then premeditated cover-ups of damaging doctrines.
Every once in a while when I was growing up, there would be some kind of parable drawn between something that happened in 1975 and how people were just living for a date. And when that date came and went and they didn't get their promised paradise, they just left because of whatever reason.
Yeah, that was like a drama we had. The little girl that was going to get baptized, and her dad had like a faith-shattering experience where in 1975 he could have left the truth like other people were because they were like living for a date. But he stayed strong and stayed in it. And people our age were like, oh yeah, we heard something about like that. Well, what was going on? Oh, like people thought 1975 was like the end of it, and then that was when paradise was going to come, and that was wrong of them to think that. And that was kind of the answer we got from like when we would ask like older generations. That was just kind of like the glossed over answer. But with doing our research, we realized it wasn't just that some people thought that. It was printed, it was communicated, it was paraded. Probably was the language that was used. And then they ended up posting sort of a redaction or an apology, if you will, that said that the language used made it seem like more of a probability than a possibility. And they were just excited. And that...
we're sorry.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say to trust in the food at the proper time and believe it and don't turn away from it, but then say, oh, well, sometimes we're wrong, we're just human. So, I mean, we came across so many. I mean, at that time, it was just a waterfall of Watchtower quotes that went against the scriptures.
Yeah.
For Watchtowers to say, you must become a Jehovah's Witness. 1983 Watchtower. Jehovah is using only one organization today to accomplish his will. To receive everlasting life in the earthly paradise, we must identify that organization and serve God as part of it. But the scriptures say, furthermore, there is no salvation in anyone else, for there is no other name under heaven that has been given among men by which we must get saved. Talking about Jesus Christ. Being a Jehovah's Witness is not going to
guarantee your salvation. Yeah.
Like, once I discovered that they were actually purposefully trying to be deceptive. There's a lot of examples of this in Watchtowers, but this one like happened right in front of me. It wasn't a past article, it was like a current article that I had been reading. It's way back when now, it was July 2017. But it was literally a propaganda article that said, protect yourself from propaganda. Watch out for propaganda. Here's how we're going to help you do that. The paragraph said, keep in mind that Satan does not want you to think clearly or reason things out well. Why? Because propaganda is likely to be most effective, says one source, if people ... are discouraged from thinking critically. Media and society in the 20th century. So never be content, passively or blindly, to accept what you hear. Use your God-given thinking abilities and power of reason to make the truth your own. Okay, but remember the ellipsis, the ... What are they leaving out there, okay? So they quoted media and society in the 20th century. And I went out and bought the book. Watchtower said, propaganda is likely to be most effective if people are discouraged from thinking critically. Here's what it says. Propaganda is likely to be most effective if people do not have access to multiple sources of information. And if they are discouraged from thinking critically. Michael Balfour has suggested that the best touchstone for distinguishing propaganda from science is whether a plurality of sources of information and of interpretations is being discouraged or fostered. Wait a second. What is Watchtower always saying? What?
Yeah, you don't need to do the research. We already done it for you.
So right there, they are literally quoting from the book, putting this into their article about guarding against propaganda, and it itself is propaganda.
Yeah.
To tell your people, only listen to us.
Yeah.
That was insane to me. To me, that was the most blatant act of deception. And after that, it was like every single thing they said after that was just lies after lies.
Right. Because if they can't be simply truthful about this, how can we believe anything else that they say?
A story that is only 10% true is 100% misleading.
It's obvious they know what they're doing, because if you look at how cult propaganda works, like how it works, like how people learn to do this, understanding psychology in order to control a populace. And once you understand how that works, you can see it blatantly in the Watchtower articles of how, for instance, they control your relationships. So they tell you not to go and make friends with the world. They tell you to only cling to your brothers and your sisters, and will stick closer than a brother, and to be very careful of your ties and your relationships with workmates, schoolmates, the public.
Or even family members who are not related, who are not interested.
Because that will be the tie that binds you to this organization. Because if you wake up to the other dozens of issues, you will ultimately have to make that choice of, do I want to leave my family? This is the community I have. And they absolutely know that is the only thing that matters. When you run out of your burning house, what do you grab first? Oh, your Bibles, your books, your television so you can watch broadcast. You go for your kids and your family members. You hear it all the time when people survive disasters. Thank God our family got out. Thank God we're all together. We lost everything, but thank God we're together. That is the only thing that matters in this life, are the people that you spend it with. Everything else can be replaced. And so to be able to control that aspect of who you have a relationship with, you control everything about a person. That is blatant manipulation. This can't be food at the proper time if it expires. If it was wrong a certain amount of years ago, it could be wrong right this minute. And if it's wrong right this minute, then we need to make that decision for ourselves of whether or not we're going to believe something
Could be wrong.
That's dictating our entire life. Now that we're out of it, one of the best parts for me is just the lack of judgmental mentality I have. Because prior, it was, anytime you see a homosexual or hear of a homosexual, it was like your mind automatically closed and you went, you. Now it's like, oh, it's not something that is disgusting anymore. It's just a person, it's just how some people are. And doing research into it, it's like that is literally how some people are born. That is truly them. To have it like so demonized in the religion as like that is disgusting and they will die. And then to actually know people like that, there's such a difference of like, this is just another human. This is a human being that we automatically shut our hearts and heads off to. That kind of mentality doesn't exist for me anymore. Anytime you would watch something on TV and you would like find yourself admiring their talent, oh, look at how wonderfully they sing, you kind of have to go in your mind, I hope they become a Jehovah's Witness so that they can sing praises to Jehovah like that in paradise.
Yeah.
Or, look at that house they just built, that is amazing. I really hope they become a Jehovah's Witness so they can build houses like that in paradise. Like you kind of have to like turn that off and like, well, if they don't, then we'll never see them again. And your heart is kind of blocked from admiring them or from enjoying other human beings. And it's so freeing to have that not there anymore, because you can just enjoy humans for being humans, and you can be a human too.
Something else I just thought of too about that's kind of fun about being out and having that lack of forced direction for your life. And it is a forced direction when you are, especially a male in the organization, you are steered towards being a pioneer, so you can be a ministerial servant, so you can be an elder, so you can be a circuit overseer, and so there's a lot of push to do that. And so the choices that you make and the things that you enjoy are supposed to be things that will help guide you down that path.
Yeah.
Being out and not being forced to go down that road has definitely allowed me to consider who I actually am without being inhibited or being forced to follow somebody else's vision for what I should be.
That's not going to be needed in paradise, or that's not a good
Right.
route.
You don't need to be a doctor, because in paradise we're not going to need doctors. Having been out now for a couple of years, I'm just now starting to realize I could pursue hobbies or interests that I couldn't pursue before. And it's very, very freeing to be able to say, this is who I am.
Yeah.
not what I am. And what I was a Jehovah's Witness. And that's...
Ooh, not what?
Yeah, and that in itself is very cloistering when you are a Jehovah's Witness.
It's like the whole world opens up to you. Just endless possibilities of what you can believe and what you can think.
One of the best things for me is a number of years ago having all my family walk away from the truth and then be able to have them back. It took a couple of years for us to reach out and get back in contact and
apologize for shunning them.
Apologize for the way that we treated them as Jehovah's Witnesses, because it wasn't kind. Jehovah's Witnesses don't treat people who leave the organization kindly by any stretch of the imagination. And that was kind of driven home to me shortly after we left, when we were at a car wash cleaning out the car, and my dad rolled in his truck and saw us, but kept going. He...
With all our kids right there.
All of our kids right there. And
he was going to park right next to us.
Yeah, and then he second thought and drove to the other end of the car wash and left. So, that's on the receiving end, but to be on the giving end of that and realizing what it feels like now after having received it is pretty rough and pretty harsh. Not very long ago now, a friend of mine growing up committed suicide because of it. He's been out a lot longer. He was the son of an elder. He got disfellowshipped for having the audacity to fall in love and get married with a woman who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, and not being sorry about it. He was shunned by everybody. I remember one time I actually saw him out and about while I was working, and he came up to strike up a conversation, and I just gave him one-word answers and tried to end the conversation as soon as possible, because you don't talk to people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses anymore.
It's almost like it's superstitious, like something from them is going to rub off on you and infect you, and it's like God will see it.
And that's why the organization calls people who leave mentally diseased. All of his family and all of his friends are Jehovah's Witnesses. He fell on hard times and he reached out for help, and they told him no. And when you're in a hard spot and even your own family refuses to help you, that puts you in a pretty hopeless position. So when Brittany asked me to make this video, I initially said no, but after thinking about it and thinking about what happened with my friend Justin, realizing that there are other people out there who are in the same boat, people who are in a hard situation, they're in a tough spot, they have nobody that they can turn to who's outside the organization, and maybe this will help them. Maybe this will give them the strength to continue on.
There's a whole life waiting for you to just unfold, and for you to discover for yourself without anybody to tell you how to do it or what to think,
do it.
To recover from all that grief and pain and all the trauma that it is to be a Jehovah's Witness. It's a grand adventure waiting for you that you're not alone in. I mean, there's communities of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses all over. There's like Reddit and Facebook groups. YouTube is a giant community. More and more people are making their out videos and expressing their stories. And so we finally decided it was time for us to do ours.
And if more and more people can come forward and say, we did it, we found these things out, and we made the decision to get out.
And we survived it.
The more people that might be helped to get out, and the more likely it'll be that somebody who has any real power can maybe put an end to it, finally, once and for all. Because my friend Justin's story is by no means an isolated incident.
No. Individually, it feels dark and hopeless and cold, but together we are very strong. The more of us that come out and stand up for ourselves and say, I'm an apostate and I don't agree with Watchtower, I don't agree with
policies or dogmas or the treatment of children or disfellowship people.
Yeah, like we oppose
The organization.
this organization, the more people that will understand that it's not because we wanted to celebrate holidays or birthdays, or because our faith wasn't strong enough,
or because our feelings got hurt by somebody.
Oh yeah, or because like an elder was mean to us.
That's not it at all. There are legitimate reasons why we made this decision, and they are very real, and they are very scary, and
Valid.
And they are valid by every legality.
You won't just hear it from us or a few apostates. Everybody's stories have a similar ring to them, where it's the same deceptions and the same lies are found out within the organization, or the same stories of abuse or trauma are being told. So it is a prevalent
systemic problem.
Yes.
Their lives matter too, and somebody needs to stand up and say, enough is enough.
Even just if individuals can all stand up at once and say, no, this isn't right, and I'm out, then that is enough.
If more people don't come out and say, hey, it's okay to be an apostate, all that really means is that you just change your mind about what you believe in. That's all it really means. As scary as that is, there are people who are out. You know people who have gotten out, who are disfellowshipped or disassociate themselves. You can probably call them and say, hey, remember me? I'm out too, and I would like to just have a conversation. There are people, and we too would be willing to help out and have conversations and say, hey, it's gonna be fine, it's hard, but...
It was the scariest time of my life.
Yeah.
I've been through hard stuff before. I had a hard childhood, parents divorced, and stuff with our marriage. But the hardest thing was losing our God. I can't condone the things I've learned about this religion. I can't face the deception of it and stay in it. But I can't lose everybody too. Is the hardest thing that we've had to do. Because it meant standing up for what was right in our conscience at the cost of every single person we ever knew. And that it was so scary. And I'm just so grateful that we came out of it together. And when our kids were still young.
One of the biggest struggles as far as other people is concerned who are still Jehovah's Witnesses is, you know, when we first started to wake up, Brittany was like, we need to tell everybody. We need to tell everybody. And I said, no. You know, there are some people like us who don't have anybody outside the organization. We've constantly said ignorance is bliss. You know, in the organization, especially if you're alone, just your family and friends in the organization with you.
And that was the terms I had to come to when I would ache for my best friends and want so desperately to explain to them, have conversations with them in my head and think, if only I could say this, they would understand and they would come out. To think the pain they would have to go through that I've gone through would be devastating to their life.
Yeah.
And at least they're safe where they are. If it means I don't get to be with them, but they're safe, I would rather have the agony of being without them than for them to be so devastated by the loss of everything, their belief, their family, their friends, their hope. Do your research through the different sources available. There's jwfacts.com, there's JW Survey, JW Struggle, there's the Reddit and the Facebook groups, and just hearing out what the critics have to say. Because I mean, if you were to buy a camera or a car or a sandwich, you know, you look at the reviews and see what people have to say, whether it's good or bad. Don't take our word for it. Don't take one website's word for it.
Do your homework.
Do your homework. Look at your Bible in entirety and the other translations of the Bible. You need to comparatively analyze what the Bible is really saying, what your Bible is really saying versus other Bibles. And do the same thing with the Watchtower quotes and with what the apostates and the critics are saying.
Yeah.